The Golden Trap. For 3 centuries, Saturn played a part. It was the polite gentleman of the outer solar system, the jewel of the cosmos. It's the first planet a child learns to draw, a smooth golden sphere wrapped in elegant, shimmering ice. From a distance of 1 billion miles, it looks composed, it looks finished, like a marble someone placed carefully in the dark and simply walked away from. But beauty is the ultimate trap. Almost everything we have learned in the last 20 years suggests that this golden image was just a costume. Beneath the amber bands and the most photographed rings in history lies a world so violent, so alien, and so fundamentally hostile to human survival that we will almost certainly never set foot on it. Not because we lack the technology to get there, but because in a very literal and terrifying sense, there is nothing to set foot on. Before we talk about the physical horrors of Saturn, you need to hear it. Space, as we are told, is a vacuum. It's silent. But NASA's Cassini spacecraft carried an instrument called the Radio and Plasma Wave Science Tool. It recorded electromagnetic vibrations from the charged particles interacting with Saturn's magnetic field. When NASA translated these frequencies into something the human ear can perceive, the scientists were stunned. They didn't hear a hum or a static buzz. They heard whooshing tones, rising whistles, and descending moans. It sounds like a layered, slightly detuned soundtrack to a nightmare. Researchers described it as a Halloween soundtrack from a haunted house that spans the diameter of 9 Earths. It is the sound of a planet screaming into the void, a chaotic electromagnetic signature produced by a magnetic field that is twisted and skewed by the planet's rapid 10-hour spin. That spin is the engine of Saturn's first great terror, the wind. On Earth, a hurricane is considered catastrophic when sustained winds cross 157 miles per hour. That's a Category 5. It's the kind of force that levels houses, tosses cars like toys, and rewrites coastlines. On Saturn, that would be considered a calm, peaceful day. Saturn's atmosphere is moving all the time at speeds that would tear our continents apart. Near the equator, the wind blows at over 1,100 miles per hour. It never stops. It doesn't slow down for the night because Saturn doesn't really have night in any way we understand. The whole planet is wrapped in a continuous planetary scale storm. If you stood under Earth's strongest tornado, the kind that erases entire towns from the map, the wind might clock in at 300 miles per hour. Saturn's everyday, boring weather is nearly 4 times worse than that. There is no still air. There is no quiet season. On Saturn, the wind isn't just part of the weather. The wind is the climate. Now, picture yourself arriving. You are in a spacecraft, descending toward the cloud tops. The first thing you notice isn't the wind itself, because wind is invisible. It's what the wind has done to the world around you. The clouds aren't drifting, they are racing. The horizon itself is moving. You see whole bands of atmosphere, each larger than a continent, sliding past each other in opposite directions at speeds your brain refuses to process. And then, you fall. This is where Saturn stops being a planet and starts being a cosmic abyss. Most people assume that if you fall through the clouds of a gas giant, you'll eventually hit a surface, a rocky shell, a floor. But on Saturn, there is no ground. There is no solid bottom waiting for your boots in the dark. You will fall, and you will keep falling, and at no point will anything solid ever meet your feet. For the first 100 miles of your descent, you are inside something almost recognizable. Wispy ammonia clouds, freezing ice crystals, and a sky that gets paler and more yellow the deeper you go. But as you sink, the temperature starts to climb, and then the pressure starts to climb even faster. About 600 miles down, the gas you've been falling through gets so compressed that it starts behaving like a liquid. But there is no splash. There is no boundary. There is no moment where you hit the surface of an ocean. The sky just slowly, smoothly becomes a fluid. It's like falling into a fog that gradually turns into syrup and then into lead. Around 1,000 miles down, the pressure is already equal to what you would feel sitting at the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth. And the terrifying part? You've barely even started. The Mariana Trench is only 7 miles deep. On Saturn, you've already fallen 140 times that distance, and the planet hasn't even begun to take you seriously yet. The deeper you go, the more the laws of physics begin to twist. The heat becomes unbearable, radiating from a core that is hotter than the surface of the sun. But it's what happens to the atoms themselves that is truly nightmare fuel. At a depth of 20,000 miles, the hydrogen around you stops being a gas or a liquid in any sense we recognize. The pressure is so immense, millions of times the pressure of Earth's atmosphere, that it forces the electrons to drift loose from their atoms. What is left is a substance called metallic hydrogen. It's a sea of liquid metal thousands of miles deep, conducting electricity like a soup of molten steel. This sea is the engine that powers the most powerful lightning in the solar system. A single bolt of Saturnian lightning releases 10,000 times the energy of the strongest bolt ever recorded on Earth. But in the middle of all this crushing pressure and electrical fury, there is something even stranger. Something that sounds like a fairy tale, but is a mathematical reality. It's raining, but it isn't raining water. The diamond forge and the impossible geometry. At the end of your fall into the metallic hydrogen ocean, you might expect the strangeness to stop. But on Saturn, the deeper you go, the more the planet begins to act like a cosmic alchemist. Remember when I said it was raining, but not water? High in the upper atmosphere, Saturn is rich in methane. When those monstrous lightning storms we talked about, the ones that last for 8 months, rip through the clouds, they strike the methane molecules, stripping away the hydrogen and leaving behind pure carbon soot. As this soot begins its long, slow fall toward the interior, the pressure begins to do its work. First, the soot is crushed into graphite, the same stuff in your pencil. But it doesn't stop there. As it sinks deeper, where the weight of the atmosphere is thousands of times greater than anything we can produce on Earth, the graphite is compressed into solid diamonds. Imagine it, a lightless abyss where hailstones of solid diamond, some as large as a closed human fist, are precipitating through the dark. They drift down like glittering ghosts through the sea of liquid metal. Eventually, even diamonds cannot survive Saturn. As they reach the lower, hotter layers where the temperature exceeds the surface of the sun, the diamonds themselves melt into a liquid carbon rain, potentially pooling around a rocky core that remains one of the greatest mysteries in astronomy. On Saturn, the very definition of precious is melted and discarded by the sheer weight of the world. But if the interior is a furnace of crushed jewels, the North Pole is a monument to a geometry that shouldn't exist. If you look at the North Pole of any other planet, you see what physics predicts: circles, spirals, and chaotic swirls. But on Saturn, there is a perfect hexagon. It is a 6-sided weather pattern 20,000 miles across. To give you some scale, you could line up 2 Earths side by side inside this shape and still have room for the moon. Each of its 6 sides is nearly 9,000 miles long, wider than the entire diameter of our planet. This isn't a temporary cloud formation. We first saw it in 1981 when Voyager flew past, and when Cassini arrived decades later, it was still there, unchanged, unblinking, and rotating at exactly the same speed as the planet's radio emissions. How does nature create a straight line in a fluid? How does a hurricane maintain sharp, 60-degree corners for 40 years? We've tried to recreate this in labs using rotating buckets of water, and while we can make tiny, vibrating polygons, nothing explains the massive, stable structure sitting on Saturn's crown. It is a geometric anomaly on a planetary scale. And in the very center of that hexagon, There was a permanent hurricane 50 times larger than the largest storm ever recorded on Earth. Its eye is wide enough to swallow the state of Texas. In high-resolution photos, this central vortex looks like a giant blood-red rose made of clouds. But this is a rose with thorns made of 500-mile-per-hour winds. Saturn doesn't just have permanent anomalies, it has a temper. About once every 30 Earth years, which is roughly one Saturnian year, the planet essentially burps. A massive storm, known as the Great White Spot, erupts at the equator. It starts as a small white knot, but within weeks it unfurls into a churning band of chaos that wraps around the entire circumference of the planet, over 200,000 miles long. It churns up ammonia ice from deep within the interior, turning the golden planet into a pale, streaky ghost. It is a reminder that the calm amber bands we see from Earth are just a thin veil. Beneath them, Saturn is a pressurized engine of heat and energy, waiting for the moment it needs to vent its fury. This brings us to the most famous part of the Saturnian disguise, the rings. From your backyard telescope, the rings look like solid, shimmering halos of light. They look like jewelry.
But up close, the beauty vanishes, replaced by the evidence of a planetary scale crime scene. The rings are not a feature of the planet. They are a graveyard. Almost every piece of the rings, from a grain of ice the size of sugar to chunks as large as mountains, was once part of something else. The prevailing theory is that a long time ago, a moon, perhaps as large as the moon Titan, wandered too close to Saturn. It crossed what scientists call the Roche limit. The Roche limit is the mathematical point of no return. Beyond this line, a planet's gravity is so strong that it pulls harder on the front of a moon than on the back. Saturn's gravity grabbed that moon and literally ripped it apart, molecule by molecule, shredding a living world into trillions of icy fragments. What we admire as the jewel of the solar system is actually just the scattered guts of a dead world held in a permanent, grinding orbit. We are staring at a massive debris field of ice shrapnel that is nearly 300,000 kilometers wide but as thin as a razor. In some places, these rings are only 30 feet thick. If you could turn them on their side, they would be invisible. It is a blade of ice slicing through the dark. But there's a secret about these rings that Cassini revealed, a secret that changes everything we thought we knew about the history of our solar system. We used to think the rings were ancient, born 4.5 billion years ago alongside Saturn itself. We were wrong. The dying halo and the alien cradle. We have looked at the storms that swallow worlds and the rains made of diamonds. But if you think the scariest part of Saturn is its weather, you are mistaken. The most terrifying thing about Saturn is its history. Because everything you see, everything we consider eternal about this planet, is actually a temporary, vanishing trick. For decades, our textbooks told us that Saturn's rings were as old as the solar system itself. We assumed they were formed 4.5 billion years ago from the same dust and gas that birthed the Sun. But when the Cassini spacecraft made its final orbits, it did something daring. It weighed the rings. By measuring the subtle gravitational tug the rings exerted on the probe, scientists calculated their mass and their purity. The results were a shock to the scientific community. The rings are too bright. They are too clean.
If they were billions of years old, they should be dark, covered in the space soot of micrometeoroids that has been drifting through the system for eons. Instead, they look like fresh, white ice. The best current estimates suggest the rings are only between 100 million and 400 million years ago. This means that for the vast majority of Earth's history, Saturn had no rings. When the first dinosaurs walked the Earth, they looked up at a night sky where Saturn was just a lonely, golden dot. The most iconic feature of our solar system is a newcomer. It arrived late to the party, and according to NASA, It's leaving early. Saturn is currently eating its own rings. As the planet's magnetic field interacts with the icy fragments, it turns them into a steady drizzle known as ring rain. Gravity is slowly winning the battle, pulling tons of water ice down into the atmosphere every single second. In about 100 million years, a mere blink in cosmic time, the rings will be gone. We didn't arrive at a planet with a permanent crown. We arrived just in time to catch a dying masterpiece before it fades into the dark. But if Saturn is a graveyard, its moons are something far more unsettling. Out of at least 274 moons, 2 stand out as worlds that shouldn't exist. First, there is Titan. Titan is the only moon in the solar system with a thick, dense atmosphere. If you stood on its surface, it would look eerily like home. There are rivers, there are lakes, and there are rolling dunes. But the chemistry is a nightmare. On Titan, it's so cold, 290 degrees below zero, that water ice is as hard as granite. The rocks are made of frozen water, and the lava is liquid ammonia. The rain on Titan isn't water, it's liquid methane and ethane, pure liquid natural gas. It falls in slow motion due to the low gravity, feeding vast black oceans where the dunes are made of static-charged plastic sand. If you jumped into a lake on Titan, you wouldn't just freeze. The thermal shock would be so extreme you would shatter like a dropped wine glass on impact. It is a world that mimics the geography of Earth using the ingredients of death. Then there is Enceladus. This tiny moon, barely 300 miles wide, should be a dead, frozen rock. Instead, it is the most active and potentially dangerous world in the system. From its south pole, giant geysers shoot plumes of water vapor hundreds of miles into the vacuum of space at supersonic speeds. These plumes are fed by a global, saltwater ocean hidden beneath miles of ice. This brings us to the moment humanity had to choose a side. In 2017, after 13 years of loyal service, the Cassini spacecraft was running out of fuel. The mission directors faced a terrifying realization. If they left Cassini to drift, it might eventually crash into Enceladus or Titan. Since the probe wasn't sterilized to the highest standards, it might carry microscopic Earth bacteria. Crashing into Enceladus meant potentially contaminating a world where something might already be swimming in the dark. To protect the possibility of alien life, we decided to murder our own machine. On September 15, 2017, Cassini was commanded to dive headfirst into the very monster it had spent a decade studying. As it plummeted at 77,000 miles per hour, the spacecraft fought to keep its antenna pointed at Earth, transmitting live chemical data from the upper atmosphere until the very last second. We watched in silence as the heat and pressure of Saturn prying the probe open, melting the metal and vaporizing the electronics. Cassini didn't just crash. It became part of the planet forever. We destroyed our best eyes in the outer system because we loved the mystery of Enceladus too much to risk it. Even in its final moments, Saturn held on to its secrets. Cassini's death dive revealed that the chemistry of the clouds was far stranger than our models predicted. But the biggest mystery remains unsolved. We still don't know exactly how long a day is on Saturn. Every other planet has a rotation period we can measure to the millisecond. But Saturn's magnetic field is skewed. It's twisted. The data drifts. Voyager said a day was 10 hours and 39 minutes. Cassini said it was different. Then it changed again. Scientists believe the interior of the planet is rotating at a different speed than the atmosphere, and the magnetic field is acting as a camouflage, hiding the planet's true pulse from our instruments. This is the real Saturn. Not the peaceful jewel from your childhood drawings, but a lord of chaos. It is a ball of pressurized liquid metal that rains diamonds and eats its own moons. It is a planet with winds that could shred continents and a geometry that defies the laws of fluid dynamics. It is beautiful, yes, but it is a beauty born from violence.
Saturn is a reminder that in the vastness of the cosmos, the things that look the most serene are often the ones hiding the most terrifying truths. We looked at the golden rings and saw jewelry. Nature looked at the same spot and saw a crime scene. Saturn isn't just a planet, it is an abyss wrapped in a golden disguise. And now that we've seen behind the mask, we can never look at those rings the same way again. How lucky we are to be watching it now, while the crown is still there, and the giant is still screaming into the void.